My name is Tina Lawson. I'm 33, and this is the night my family turned my birthday into a test I never asked for. The plan was simple: a small dinner at my parents' house in Cleveland, a cake, a few forced smiles. Then I'd go home and forget about it. I was already braced for the usual jokes about how I work too much and take life too seriously, the digs about me not having kids yet, the constant comparison to my sister. What I did not expect was my nephew standing in front of everyone, holding the gift I'd bought for myself because no one else had bothered, and turning it into a performance. He shook the box like it was part of a show, smirked at me, then did something so casual and cruel that the room actually laughed. He walked to the fireplace and tossed my gift into the flames like it was trash that had wandered into the wrong house. As the paper caught, he repeated something his mother had said about me, a line that cut deeper than anything they had ever said to my face. People laughed, someone even clapped, and I realized in one sharp moment that this wasn't a family gathering anymore. It was a verdict. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just smiled, stood up, and walked out without touching the cake. Before I tell you what he said, and what happened after I walked out, tell me, what time is it for you right now? And where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. By the time the sun came up, my phone was buzzing across the nightstand. I let it vibrate through the first round of notifications. I made coffee, sat at my small kitchen table, and watched the screen light up again. Group chat messages stacked one under another, all from the same people who had laughed while my gift burned in their fireplace. I already knew none of them were texting to apologize for anything. When I finally picked up the phone, I didn't open any of the missed calls. I opened the family chat. The first message was from my mother, long and tight. She wrote that I had made a scene, that I had embarrassed everyone, that walking out like that was childish and disrespectful. At the end, one line stood on its own, short enough to feel more like a verdict than a comment. "You're officially cut out of everything." I stared at that sentence until the letters blurred. My chest tightened, but not from surprise. It felt more like recognition. They had finally said out loud what they'd been hinting at for years. I typed one answer, my hand steady. "Perfect. Check whose name is on the house you're living in." The moment I hit send, the chat exploded. My sister's name flashed over and over as she tried to call. Then my mother, then my father. I put the phone face down on the table and let it ring until it stopped. When the room was quiet again, I opened my laptop instead. Pulling up the county property records page had become second nature ever since the day I signed the papers. Years earlier, when my parents were one missed payment away from losing the house, I was the one who stepped in. My credit, my savings, my signature. The bank refinanced everything under my name to keep the place from being taken. On the screen, the record hadn't changed. Owner, Tina Lawson. Seeing my name in that box didn't feel triumphant. It felt like proof that I wasn't crazy for being done playing the grateful guest in a home I legally owned. I took a screenshot, saved it to a new folder labeled with the date, and closed the laptop. The silence didn't last. My mother left a voicemail saying she just wanted to talk. My father sent a short message asking me to come by that evening so they could clear the air. My sister sent paragraphs accusing me of threatening them, calling me ungrateful, listing every favor she thought she'd ever done for me. Reading it all felt less like a conversation and more like a closing argument. I didn't respond. I went for a walk around the block instead, letting the cold air calm me down so I wouldn't second-guess myself. I needed distance before I went back into that house, not because I was afraid I'd change my mind, but because I wanted to walk in with my head clear. When evening came, I drove over at the time my father had asked for. The snow on their front steps was already shoveled away, and the light from the living room spilled through the thin curtains. Inside, the air smelled like whatever had been cooked for lunch hours earlier. My parents were at the kitchen table. My mother sat with her arms crossed, My father with his hands folded. My sister leaned against the counter, phone in hand, watching me like she expected an apology. No one mentioned the gift or the fire. No one said the word birthday. My mother started by saying they were worried about me, that I had been distant, that the way I left last night was hurtful. My father added that family doesn't walk out over a joke. My sister rolled her eyes every time my name came up, as if the whole thing was a chore. I listened, letting their words pile up without interrupting. When they finished, my father reached into a drawer and took out a thin envelope. He placed it on the table between us like it might settle everything on its own. He said they had found a way to make things simpler for everyone. All I had to do was sign some paperwork so the house reflected what it really was, the family home, not just mine on paper. He didn't push the envelope toward me. He just tapped it once with his fingers and waited. I looked at the envelope, then at the 3 people sitting in front of me. For the first time that day, I felt something sharper than hurt settle in my chest. It wasn't anger. It was something closer to clarity. I didn't open the envelope until I was back in my apartment. It had stayed on the passenger seat the drive, untouched. I set it on the kitchen table, turned on the light, and waited a moment with my hands on the chair. I was done signing things on trust alone. When I pulled the papers out, the layout told me everything. The first page confirmed that I was the only owner of the house my parents lived in. The next pages described a revised ownership plan that would add their names to the title. At the bottom, a blank line waited for my signature as if this was an obvious next step. There was nothing in those pages about the birthday dinner, nothing about the gift in the flames, nothing about the message cutting me out of the family group. No apology, no explanation, just a quiet assumption that I would sign away part of the one thing that was fully mine. I read the packet line by line. I wanted the details settled in my mind in case anyone later claimed the forms had said something different. When I finished, I slid everything back into the envelope and moved it to a drawer. My answer was no. Keeping the documents was my way of making sure that answer had weight. That evening, my phone barely stopped buzzing. My mother said she hoped I would do the right thing. My father wrote that adding their names would avoid conflict and keep the house safe. My sister sent long messages insisting the place had always been the family home, that my decent credit years before did not make it mine alone, that refusing to sign proved I did not care. I scrolled through each message without replying. The sequence was familiar. Guilt first, duty second, then blame when neither worked. I felt different this time, less guilty and more done. 2 days later, when I pulled into my parking lot after work, I saw my sister waiting near the entrance to my building. She leaned on the stair rail and followed me inside without asking whether it was a good time. In my kitchen, she put her bag on the counter and launched straight into a speech. She said our parents were under stress, that they might lose everything, that my refusal to sign was tearing the family apart. She said I was choosing paperwork over loyalty and acting like an outsider instead of a daughter. Every point led back to the same demand: add their names and end the fight. I listened until her argument started to circle. Then I told her I was not changing the deed. The mortgage was in my name, the title was in my name, and after being told I deserved nothing, I was not handing the house back like a favor. She did not challenge the facts. She came after me instead, calling me selfish and dramatic when I still did not move. When she realized I was not bending, she grabbed her bag and left. The door closed hard enough to shake the pictures on the wall. This time, it sounded like my boundary, not their punishment. That night, I pulled the envelope from the drawer and set it next to my phone. I took photos of every page and saved them in a folder on my laptop. Then I opened the family chat and began taking screenshots. Every message about what I owed them, every mention of the house, every attempt to push me went into that same folder. At least now I had more than memory. The next morning at work, my phone lit up with a call from the bank that held the mortgage. The woman on the line confirmed my name and address, then asked if I had recently applied for a new loan using my parents' house as collateral. I told her I had not applied for any new credit and had not given anyone permission to do it in my name. She explained that an online application had come through under my details, tied to the house, but some numbers did not match their records, and the signature file looked wrong. Their system had flagged it as suspicious, and she was calling to check whether it was real. I asked her to stop the application and treat it as fraudulent, and to send me whatever documentation she was allowed to release. She said they would start a fraud review and suggested I report it outside the bank as well. When the call ended, I wrote down her name, the time, and what she had told me, then added that note to the same folder. Looking at the new list of files on my screen, I understood that this was not just another round of cruel words. It had crossed into something I could take to a lawyer. The first thing I did after that call was look up an attorney. I did not tell my family I was doing it. I found a small firm in Cleveland that handled real estate disputes and financial fraud, then sat in my car outside their building before I went in. It felt strange walking into an office to talk about people who were supposed to be on my side, but the call from the bank had cleared any doubt about where this was heading. The attorney who met with me introduced himself as David Sterling. His office was neat, with file boxes along one wall and licenses above his desk. He asked me to start from the beginning, not with feelings, but with facts. I told him about the refinance that put the house in my name, the way my parents still lived there, the birthday dinner, the message cutting me out, the push to sign the new paperwork, and the loan application I had not made. He listened without interrupting, only pausing to clarify dates and relationships. When I finished, he asked to see the documents. I slid my phone across the desk so he could look at the screenshots, then handed him the envelope from my parents. He read every page, marking a few sections with sticky flags. When he looked up, his expression was calm, but not casual. He said I had done the right thing by refusing to sign and by telling the bank to flag the application. He told me to save every message, voicemail, and letter connected to the house. Then he said something I had not heard from anyone in my family in years, that I had the right to say no and to enforce it. We talked about options. As the only legal owner, I was not obligated to share the title just to make other people feel secure. If someone had used my information to apply for a loan without consent, that was fraud, whether they were family or not. He suggested documenting everything carefully in case we needed to show a pattern. When I left his office, the air outside felt sharper. I walked back to my car and sat with both hands on the wheel. For the first time in days, I felt like there was something solid under my feet, even if it was just a folder of files and a lawyer's business card. Over the next few days, I did exactly what David told me to do. I saved every new message into that folder on my laptop. I took screenshots when my sister sent paragraphs about what I owed our parents. I kept the voicemail where my mother said I was pushing her toward a breakdown by refusing to sign. I wrote down what time they called and how many times the phone rang before they hung up. The guilt did not disappear, but it started to sit next to something stronger. Every record I added made it harder to pretend this was normal. One evening, as I was sorting through screenshots, there was a knock at my apartment door. It was one of my parents' neighbors, a woman named Colleen Rains, who had lived across the street from them for years. She looked uncomfortable, but said she needed to show me something. Colleen told me she had a doorbell camera, and that it had picked up activity outside my parents' house the night before, well after midnight. She pulled up the footage on her phone. The video showed the front steps, the porch light, and a figure moving near the door. The shape was hard to see in the grainy image, but the car parked at the curb looked familiar. Colleen said she did not want to make assumptions, but she recognized the car as one my sister often drove. The person in the video stayed on the porch for a while, then left something on the doormat before walking away. Colleen had noticed it the next morning and worried it might be meant for me. I thanked her and promised I would check. On my way over to the house, my hands tightened on the steering wheel. It was late, but not so late that anyone would question why I was there. The street was quiet, the porch light on, the same as always. Sitting on the mat was a small box I had never seen before. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands. There was no card, no label, nothing on the outside. It was light, almost weightless, but the timing and the video made it feel heavier than anything I had taken from that house. I did not open it there. I locked the front door, checked the windows, and carried the box back to my car. A few days later, the fallout followed me into work. I arrived early, hoping to get lost in emails long enough to stop thinking about the house. I set my bag down, turned on my computer, and tried to treat the family group chat as one more notification I did not have to open. That ended when I saw a message from Human Resources asking me to stop by before 9. It was short and careful, the kind of note people send when they have something uncomfortable to say and do not want to put it all in writing. My stomach tightened before I even reached the office. The HR manager, who usually only spoke to me about benefits and training sessions, had a printout on her desk when I walked in. She greeted me politely, asked me to sit, and folded her hands on top of the papers. The look on her face told me this had nothing to do with missed deadlines. She explained that the company had received an anonymous email about me. The writer claimed I had been mistreating my parents, that I was threatening them over the house, and that I was using my job to pressure them. Attached to the email were screenshots of old social media posts and vague references to the property records. The language was measured enough to sound reasonable yet sharp enough to raise concern. Heat rose in my face as she talked. I knew who had written it. The phrases and the tone were too familiar. Even without a name, the message sounded like my sister. I told the HR manager the email was part of a personal conflict that had nothing to do with my work, that the accusations were false, and that I was already working with an attorney because of what was happening with the house. She listened and said the company still had to treat it seriously. They could not ignore a complaint mentioning harassment, even if it came from outside. By the end of the meeting, she informed me I would be placed on leave with limited access to internal systems while they reviewed everything. It was not labeled as discipline, but it meant my income was suddenly uncertain, and my normal routine was gone. I walked back to my desk with a hollow feeling in my chest, packed my things into my bag, and left before anyone else could ask what was going on. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and called David. I told him about the email, the meeting, and the leave. He asked me to forward anything the company had shared with me and to write down the key phrases I remembered. He said it all mattered, that it showed someone was trying to damage my reputation at the same time someone was trying to move against my property. Back at my apartment, I created a new folder on my laptop just for work issues. I saved the HR messages, my notes from the meeting, and a short summary of the call with David. The growing list of files looked less like random screenshots and more like an organized record. While I worked, more messages came in from my family. My mother wrote that involving outsiders was a betrayal. My father said all of this could have been avoided if I had simply cooperated. My sister accused me of dragging her name through the mud, even though I had not given her name to anyone but my attorney. They all circled the same point in different words. If I gave up control of the house, the pressure would stop. There was nothing to negotiate in that kind of offer. It was not a compromise. It was a demand. Later that week, Colleen sent me a text. She had reviewed more footage from her doorbell camera and wanted me to know that a car matching my sister's had parked on my parents' street several times at odd hours. She said she would keep the recordings in case I needed them and did not push me to explain what was going on. I thanked her, saved her messages, and added another entry to my list of dates and details. Between the call from the bank, the envelope my parents had handed me, the visit to my apartment, and now the email that had reached my job, the same pressure line ran through everything. It was not a single bad decision or a joke gone too far. It was a steady effort to push me into surrender by pressing every weak point they could reach. Looking at the folders on my screen that night, I understood that I was no longer dealing with an argument inside a family. I was dealing with a strategy, and I needed to treat it like one. The next step happened quietly, the way serious things usually begin. David called me early one morning and asked if I could come by his office in person. His tone was steady, but there was a weight under it that made me pay attention. I drove across town with a notebook in my bag and every file on a flash drive, trying not to imagine what new angle my family had found. In the conference room, David had a thin stack of papers spread out in front of him. He said he had contacted the title company that handled the refinance on my parents' house and asked them to check for any recent activity tied to the property. They had found something. According to their records, there had been an inquiry about initiating a transfer of ownership and a potential sale. The request claimed I had agreed to let a relative handle the paperwork on my behalf. A scanned signature with my name was attached. David slid the copy toward me. The curve of the letters looked like someone had been tracing a memory of my handwriting instead of the real thing. He told me the title office had not moved forward because too many details felt off. But the fact that someone had tried to start the process at all meant we were no longer just dealing with a theoretical risk. He had already asked them to freeze any action on the property unless it came directly from him or from me in writing. As he talked, I wrote down the dates and the names of the people he mentioned. I asked him what came next. He said we would assemble everything into a single package: screenshots, bank correspondence, the loan application, the envelope from my parents, and now the attempted transfer through the title company. Once it was all together, he planned to send it to the county office that handles real estate fraud and, if necessary, to the district attorney. On my way home, I stopped by a quiet parking lot and sat behind the wheel for a while. Cars moved in and out around me, people going about errands that had nothing to do with forged signatures or family pressure. For the first time, it crossed my mind that this might end with someone facing charges, not just an argument and a few hurt feelings. Later that week, David called again. This time he had news from a potential buyer. A local investor had been approached about purchasing the house. He had been told that my parents needed to downsize and that I was too busy to manage the sale, so a relative was handling it. The buyer had stepped back when the title company raised questions, but he was willing to share the emails he had received. David forwarded the messages to me. Reading through them felt like listening to my sister with the sound turned down. The phrases were different, but the story was the same. I was difficult. I was unstable. I was not really attached to the house. It framed the sale as a favor to my parents and made my supposed agreement sound like a minor detail. I added the emails to my folders and sat at my kitchen table with the laptop open, letting the pattern settle in my mind. The birthday, the message cutting me off, the envelope asking for my signature, the loan application, the late-night visits, and now this attempted sale. Each piece lined up with the next. It was not random. My phone lit up again that night. My mother left a long voicemail asking why I was dragging strangers into a private situation. My father said I was turning my back on them. My sister insisted I was blowing everything out of proportion. None of them mentioned the forged documents. None of them mentioned the bank, or the title company, or the investor who had nearly been pulled in. I stopped listening after a few seconds and set the phone down on the counter. Every new message went into the folder. I did not answer any of them. Instead, I wrote an email to David confirming that I wanted him to move forward with whatever formal complaints were necessary. When he replied, he kept it short. He said he would contact the appropriate agencies, provide the information they needed, and keep me updated once there was movement. He reminded me to avoid direct contact with my family about the house. If they had something to say, they could speak to him. That night, I closed my laptop and turned off the kitchen light. The apartment felt small, but it was mine, and nobody else's name was on the lease or the door. For the first time, I let myself imagine the possibility that I could protect what belonged to me without their permission. Soon after that, everything left the group chat and moved into official paperwork. David called to say the county office that handles real estate fraud had reviewed our file and passed it to a prosecutor. There was no drama, just a notice with a case number, my name, the address of the house, and a list of documents they accepted as evidence. Seeing my family reduced to a line in that file felt strange, but it was the first time the situation was not being filtered through anyone's story. Investigators began their work. They spoke with the bank that flagged the loan application, the title company that refused the transfer, and the investor who almost bought a house that was never honestly for sale. They looked at the scanned signature pretending to be mine, the emails and messages I had saved, and the forms my parents had tried to slide in front of me. Once all of it sat in one place, it stopped looking like confusion and started looking like a pattern. Eventually, they met with my parents and my sister. I was not there, but the tone of their messages changed. My mother stopped sending long voicemails. My father's texts turned short and stiff, then disappeared. My sister moved from accusing me to explaining herself. None of that touched the record. Documents do not care whether someone feels bad later. When the prosecutor's decision came, I had already run out of shock. The office decided to press charges against my sister for the forged signature and the attempted transfer of the house. The focus stayed on what could be shown: applications, forms, signatures, inquiries. No one asked whether I was a good daughter. My sister took a deal. She accepted probation, had to cover costs tied to the failed transaction, and was ordered to stay away from anything connected to my property or finances. A protective order barred her from contacting me directly. For someone who had treated my boundaries as optional for years, being shut out of my phone, my doorstep, and my records was its own punishment. My parents were not charged, but the fallout landed on them. The investigation shattered the story they had leaned on, the one where I was ungrateful, and my sister was just under stress. The mortgage remained in my name. I decided not to renew the unspoken arrangement that let them live there on my credit. If they wanted a place they controlled, they would have to secure it without using me. Eviction looked like paperwork, not a shouting match. With David's help, I served notice, filed the forms, and waited through the required deadlines. On the final day, a moving truck pulled up in front of the house in Cleveland. Boxes came down the steps. Furniture followed. The front door opened and closed until the rooms were empty. I parked far enough down the street that they would not see me and watched through the windshield. My parents carried out their things from a house I had once saved and was now letting go. I did not step out of the car. When the truck pulled away and the street went quiet, I turned the key and drove back to my apartment. Once the place was vacant, I changed the locks and walked through each room. The fireplace where my birthday gift had burned was just brick and darkened stone. I let myself feel how heavy that room had always been, then called a real estate agent the next morning and put the property up for sale. Photos went up, showings happened, an offer came in, and I signed the closing documents. When it was finished, the money went into an account with only my name on it. No shared access, no promises attached, no one else entitled to it because of blood. Work still has sharp days. Some nights I still hear my nephew's voice in my head, repeating words that were never really his. The difference is simple. I no longer believe I owe any of them another chance to stand around my fire and laugh at me. What changed most was my idea of family. I used to think family meant absorbing every slight and calling it love. It took a ruined birthday and a stack of forged papers to understand that loyalty to myself counts too. Protecting what I built, even from people who share my last name, does not make me heartless. It means I finally stood up on my own side. Thank you for listening to my story. If it made you think about your own boundaries, you can share it with someone who might need permission to draw theirs.